Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey, Robin, how are you?
Hey, Mark, good to see you again. How are you? How you been? Doing well?
Pretty good. Hey, I'm out on the west coast of the U.S., and where are you at right now?
Toronto.
How are things in Toronto?
A little warm, but not extremely hot. I think we're 27 degrees Celsius. For Canada, we only have short summer, and I'm hearing August is going to be like fallish kind of a scenario for us. So fall will be coming quickly for us. So we enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds like the best time of the year in Seattle is definitely the summertime. Hey, I'm really excited about this conversation because we've worked together off and on for many years, but we've always, whatever role we've been in, whether even if it's just an overall business role, we're still, I think, really partial to looking after the business development and sales side of things, right?
That's right.
And we both, I don't want to add up the total years of experience between the two of us, but I'm sure it's a lot. So
2 years of experience here. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about sales, and we haven't scripted this out. We haven't even talked about it, put together a topic list.
Best way to do those.
Yeah, exactly. And so if it's okay with you, because I think, you have a lot of lessons and a lot of great experience and that we can learn from you. I think I have a bit of experience as well. I think, is it okay for you? I can just throw out some questions. I'm not anticipating that we're going to agree on everything, but maybe I'll throw out some questions and then we'll just kind of go back and forth on this. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever format makes sense. Go for it.
Just typical American West Coast, shoot from the hip, and who knows?
Don't worry about it. That's the best way to do it. Those are honest conversations.
Excellent. So let me ask you this, because I've worked in a lot of organizations, and whenever an organization, well, most organizations are product or service driven, a lot of times, even though one of the most important things you can do is get out there and sell it, people who are involved with product or service delivery, sometimes they have this view of salespeople that are just like, well, we'll just get some salespeople and they'll just go out and do the sales thing, right? It's this really, commoditized, simple thing. Mm-hmm. I probably have a different view, and I'll tell you that in a second. But let me ask you this as a start off, a kickoff. Mm-hmm. Do you consider sales to be simple or complex or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah. So we've had over the years with many consultants the debate regarding what makes up a salesperson. Mm-hmm. And it starts with the conversation that, every entrepreneur or every business owner needs to have and needs to do some soul searching. And this is where, some people, they do the easy way out, meaning the cheapest solution they can find to fulfill the sales obligation, they go get it. And so it may work. Maybe, somebody who's been in the project management or who's been a translator or an engineer. In some cases, I've seen some doozies out there. And all of a sudden they exhibit a little bit of an extrovert kind of an attitude. Then all of a sudden that person is paintbrushed with a salesperson. We could use you in sales, man. Just move to sales. Sales is a professional business. It is a professional career that people develop over time and understand it clearly and understand it not necessarily as it relates to a product or services, but they understand that connection between a market and, say, a product or services that you want to deliver to the market. But mm-hmm. It's not exclusive to product A or product B or product C. That knowledge can be gained. The DNA of the salesperson, that's what's most important. If you've got a very good DNA for a salesperson, then the other stuff, the extra stuff that you layer on top of that, product knowledge, tactical things that you need to train them on, those becomes okay. Because if you start with the wrong makeup of that individual, it doesn't matter what else you put on top of it. And we've seen it over time. You and I worked with many people. You've seen it over time. There's a lot of people that come into the sales role and they have 1 or 2 good years and that's it. They flame out. The people that last are the people that they sustained the process and they learned that process and they kept it and they fine-tuned it over the years. A lot of people nowadays, they focus, on learning the tools, etc. You need to learn the tools. You need to learn how to work with the tools, be it whatever the CRM you're using or whatever tools you're using. You need to learn those tools. Most important things which you cannot teach people is either you're born with something called, I want to I want to be able to connect with people. I want to be able to work with people to sell them, not necessarily to make commission only, but to actually connect with people. If you remove as you're undergoing a sales process, if you remove the connection between that transaction that you're doing and the commission, that relieves a bunch of things out of people's mind. And then you focus on the human element of connecting that individual that perhaps you could be using your product or could use your product or service. And honestly, and being authentic in the way you're communicating with those individuals, with those people. And, how many salespeople can say, I've known this customer for 20 years and it doesn't matter which company I move to, I can find something to sell to them. Not many.
Well, so yeah, no, you just touched on a bunch of things. And my question was, is it simple or complex? And I think by the fact that you've touched on so many different things, you've answered that it is, can be quite complex because it's not as simple as just go finding somebody, throwing them in the chair and say, hey, go sell. No. And I would agree with, I think your major point there is you can't just say, oh, well, today you're a salesperson, because there's a lot of, I would say one of the foundational attributes of a good salesperson comes with their ability to communicate. You talked about empathy, for example, problem solving. And, you can teach somebody a very specific skill, like, for example, how to draft a proposal, how to create a quote. But communication skills are something that we learn over our lifetime. And a sense of empathy is something that we develop over our lifetime. And if somebody says, hey, I don't know how to communicate, but I think I can be a good salesman, that's really tough. My biggest challenge is when people lack those essential communication skills or empathy or problem solving skills, because those are hard to teach and take time. The other things, how to pick up a phone and make a phone call, I can teach you that. I can tell you how to write an email. I can tell you how to ask for a referral. But again, those foundational skills are quite challenging. Let me just ramble on for one more second here, because I happen to think sales is extremely complex due to what we're dealing with. We're dealing with human beings. The most complicated thing in the known universe is right here between our ears. It's the human brain. Mm-hmm. And sales doesn't typically just involve your brain and your emotions. It involves your counterpart's brain, their team's brain. It involves the market. It involves competition, whether or not your product has what it needs. There's so many different aspects to it. So I think it's really important that from a level set point from the beginning, we recognize that it's not as simple as just, hey, we can hire this person in X country because they're cheap and throw them into a chair and they're going to do the job.
That's right. You're absolutely correct. And that individual that knows how to communicate, that individual that knows how to float in a conversation, depending on who they're talking to, they can either speak at a technical level, they can move their communication style depending on the audience they're talking to, and they can come across as very, not just necessarily they're talking to the CEO's assistant. They don't want to sound condescending. They want to sound like very empathetic, very genuine in that conversation. But again, when they're talking to a CEO, they want to speak that language. They want to speak the language of a CEO. You don't want to be talking tactical with that individual. So that ability to float through the conversation through an organization that you're trying to address, not everybody can have that. I've seen it a million times where salespeople, they get it wrong 100% of the time, because you cannot always force yourself in. That forceability works. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, somebody must have told you in class, Sales 101, don't take no for an answer. I get it. But you have to be smooth in how you don't take no for an answer. You can't just keep breaking glass here. It's not like a bull in a china shop. You got to be able to build upon these conversations.
So I think, one way I would look at it is rapport building. Whoever's in front of you, you have to build a little rapport. Let me ask you this. Okay. So you walk into a meeting. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. Okay. So you log into a meeting, right? Which is, come on, man. I know. So just take a step back. My whole life, I've always told everybody, get the meeting, because if you can get the meeting and meet with them in person, that's half the battle. You can start to build that trusted relationship. But anyway, you log into a meeting, you walk into a meeting, and some people just want to get down to business right away. I'm of the opinion that it's worthwhile to take a few minutes to build some rapport, find some common interest, some commonality. How do you do that? Let's say that you're kicking off a meeting right now. What would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would like to get to know the individual first, which city they're in. I mean, that's a pretty simple question as we started this conversation.
Talk about the weather. It's always safe, right?
Safe. That's a neutral point that nobody can disagree on. And, get to know a little bit of the individual, like if they're willing to open up to you or, I remember I won't name any names here, but I remember one time actually I can because one of the companies no longer exist. So, there was an an account manager was assigned to big bank in Canada by a big telecom company out of the US. Okay. And there was their counterpart here in Canada, who is another big telecom, no longer exists, Nortel. So the American company wants to take on that account. Now they know that company, Nortel, has the account completely locked. All the devices are Nortel, etc. So the first assignment, and I remember that because I know the individual at the time, that's like 20, 30 years ago. The first assignment of that individual, his boss gave him out of the US, said, I don't want you to sell anything. I just want you to come back every sales meeting and report to me on the individuals, who names, for instance, what do they like? What do they dislike? What kind of beer they like to drink? How do they, what kind of sports they like? And that's it. And spend the time and get to know them and don't sell to them right away. And so they spent about a year, 2 years mapping up the account, getting to know them on a personal level. He hasn't sold anything yet. And in about 2-3 years, when that RFP came back online on the street, they won the account. Why? Wow. Because they started with getting to know the customer. That information is very, very, like I've got customers who are retired. They're gone now from the business. I'm not selling to them. I'm still connecting them. I still have customers that I take on, photography trips because I'm a hobby photographer. I take them on photography trips and they're retired. They're no longer working in the industry. I take them to train them on photography or show them how they use their cameras, etc.
It's interesting because a lot of times when I'll start a meeting online, or if I go in person, I'll ask. And for example, I can see some photos behind you or some pictures behind you there, and I might ask and be like, "What are those? Did you take those?" And because a lot of people, especially these days that we've been doing this remote work for so long, they'll start to put books behind them, artwork, things that it's kind of representative of some part of who they are, right? Sure. And if I see, some golf pictures, a bag of clubs, I'll just start asking, "Are you a golfer?" "Oh yeah." And God, man, people like to talk about business, but what do they really like to talk about? Their photography, their sports, their hobbies, whatever, man. So yeah, go ahead. Back to you.
Whatever is dear to their heart. That's what you're trying to get at. You're trying to move the conversation from the logical sense, meaning dollars and cents, 1 + 1 = 2, to more an emotional sense. Yeah. Because if you move the conversation to an emotional sense, whatever the topic happened to be at the time, you got to keep it within reasons, I guess. That now you're building 2 levels of connections. You're building the logical connection where if one day I make a proposal for this individual on a business level and I already know the emotional level of that individual, at least I'm connecting the two together. At least now I have a chance at 2 together.
100%. And I know this could sound like we're trying to manipulate people or things like that. Here's the deal. I believe that nobody will buy from anybody unless they trust you. Okay. And you could offer something for free. I could meet you on the side of the street and say, "Hey, you want this watch?" And you'd be like, "No, man, get away from me." Right. It's like something's weird here. Right. But if whenever you engage with somebody, whether it's an initial fact-finding discussion, whether it's creating a proposal, doing a demo, that's your top line objective. I would say a parallel objective is to establish trust and to strengthen trust. Trust takes time, and there are ways to accelerate it, but a big part of that is just getting to know them and ask questions and find a common interest, because it does tap into that emotional side. Go ahead.
And what I was going to mention is the style varies, and this is where I sometimes fault some of the individuals, some of the salespeople that I've worked with over the years, is that if the transaction is let's say you're selling hardware, and that transaction, the hardware is sold and the transaction is terminated, it's done. It's different a little bit from a customer that you probably have to maintain because they buy from you on a day-to-day basis, And that relationship could live like 4 or 5 years down the road, depends on the length of the contract. So, but regardless, if your approach is, I'm just going to inject that style, if you will, that you and I were discussing right now, based on what kind of transaction I'm involved in, short-term versus long-term, that's not genuine. That's not authentic. You have to.
And it doesn't feel good to you either, right? Like for me, I have business relationships that go back 25 years. People have changed companies and changed jobs, and out of the blue, they'll reach out to me and say, "Hey, Mark, are you still in this line of work? We're looking for it." And that is so rewarding, right? But beyond that, just getting to know people as real people. I mean, we live in this frenetically paced, crazy world where everybody's hyper busy, multitasking all the time. And I feel like it's too easy to have a lot of superficial relationships. But if you can sit down with somebody and get to know them, that in itself is inherently rewarding, in my opinion.
Look, I mean, I've seen it, and I've heard it many times. There is a difference between an aluminum siding salesperson and a person who's trying to develop and build relationships. That's what we're trying to do. We haven't sold anything yet. We're just trying to build relationships. And if the relationship is built, which is the bridge to selling something eventually, maybe it doesn't. I mean, I've learned, 30 years ago now, that sometimes you go to a customer and after you establish this connection and after you talk to them, you may conclude what you're trying to bring them is not good for them. It's not like because I'm tasked to sell them, I'm going to sell to them.
So let me ask you, what do you do in that situation? I have my answer, but I want to hear your answer. What do you do?
In that situation, I'm fine recommending somebody else. I'm happy recommending somebody else.
You know what? I same way. I'll just say, you know what? Based upon what you're telling me, our solution, it probably isn't the best fit. And then I would pivot in two directions. One, I would say, if it's okay with you, I will go back to my team, talk with them, and if we can come up with something that matches your requirements, is it okay to come back to you? And of course, they always say sure. And then the other one is what you just said, to say, maybe I can recommend somebody that's a better fit.
Yeah.
What have you done then? You've made a trusted relationship.
100%, because salespeople get painted with the wrong brush.
The used car lot guy, that's going to force something on you that's not going to be a good fit. And you just, go ahead.
That's right. This is where we're trying to distinguish between a professional salesperson, a person who develops relationships for long term. And we'll talk about some of the side effect of that. The long-term relationships with somebody, build the network, establish reputable network, and versus somebody who just throw mud on the wall, for the lack of a better example, throw mud on the wall and see what sticks. If that's your approach, if that's what you need, and that's what your company or business requires at the time, okay, maybe you have a short business model or business plan that you're trying to meet 2-3 years. I'm out. Fine. You can apply that. You just need some quick wins. If you're trying to establish long-term and put big foothold in the market for the future, you need to build those relationships on a solid footing. And that's the only way you can do it.
100% agree. Okay, so we've been talking, and I want to come back to that in terms of what are some of the benefits, because you kind of referenced some of the longer term benefits of that. But before we get to that, I want to come back away from these like communication and empathy building and development skills. And then let's go to some of the skills that you can teach, like product knowledge. So if I just throw that out there, how important is product knowledge?
To me, it is not as important as being able to connect. And let me throw an example. Like you see these, advertisement, or people are looking for people to hire in a sales capacity. It's absolute must. They need to know pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Okay. They need to know pharmaceuticals. Can I ask why? Why do they need to know pharmaceuticals? If they're talking to a CEO about connecting your company to their company, what kind of product knowledge are they discussing at a technical level, at a CEO level at that point? Not much. Like very, very high level. I remember my first day on the job, literally, I said to Larry, I said, so what do we do? What do you guys do in your industry? I don't know anything about the digitalization industry. He took me to his office, Mark, and there's a whiteboard in his office. He said, literally, he put one word on one side of the table, put an arrow to another word. He said, we take one word from one language and put it into another language. That's all you need to know. And that's it. So there is a product knowledge required depending on what level are you talking to. But if what we're talking about a professional business development at a C level, talking to CEOs, changing the business, changing the way the dynamics work. These guys are not selling like your $10 orders. These guys are going around saying, if I'm selling a widget, I'm not going to the next grocery store selling that widget. I'm going to Costco and I'm saying, how many tractor trailers do you need from this? I'm not going in saying, hey, let's sell a few pre-transaction of this. That's a different caliber of selling. If you're trying to,
I'm gonna push back a little bit on you in terms of, for me personally, I like to understand something so that I can actually start to believe in it. Because if I believe in it, I have that emotion and that drive and that enthusiasm. And the enthusiasm is contagious. If I don't believe in it, and I found this with some people when they're just getting started, again, I can't teach those, basic communication skills that they've acquired over their whole life, but I can teach them about the product, at least in terms of what the key metrics are or key factors are, and get them out into the market, because getting into the market also is a way of kind of accelerating your product knowledge. And then as soon as you start to believe in what you're selling, it becomes fun. Because if I believe in what I'm selling, I'm helping people,
Yeah, but that's that information that you can gain, not the first day on the job. I'm just imagining your first day on the job, and I know, let's say, a CEO somewhere that I think that would be a good fit for this conversation. I'm green still. I don't know much about the product, but I'm willing to start that conversation. Now, as I go along here and my career progresses in a certain company and I'm learning the product, that's a different discussion. You got to be able to stand up and talk about your company as you own the company. You're not a salesperson of the company. This is where things get a little bit more effective in your sales pitch. When you are presenting as the owner of the company, and that's how much emotion is coming out of your heart when you're doing this. You're not doing it in a robotic way. You're not presenting your pitch in a robotic way, like somebody paid me to do this, so I'm sorry, I have to do it. That's not how it works. You have to do this and take ownership of it as if you own the company. I've had an old boss a long time ago. He says, treat it like you own it.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Treat it like you own it. I've learned, so far in this conversation, I've learned two things. Treat it like you own it. And the other one was the manager who had the wisdom to say, don't go and try to sell these people. I want you to come back and tell me about them. I want you to find out as much as you can about them, what kind of beer they like, and so on and so forth. And I think that's a great leadership approach because it allows those people to build a relationship, build their confidence, get to know, because every time the more meetings you go into, your learning kind of accelerates for that particular industry, so on. But let me ask you this. A lot of times when people are first getting started, they get really nervous in sales meetings. I'm sure, I remember like my first couple of meetings, and even when I switched industries, I remember when I moved into the local industry in 2008, and I remember going out on sales calls, and the first few times I was actually a little bit nervous because it was like a new thing for me, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Talk a little bit about that. How do you get that confidence?
So practice, and practice internally first. In any chance you get to practice your pitch internally with your boss, with your colleagues, whoever. Even record yourself on if people are working remote, just grab a Zoom camera and record yourself doing it. Not necessarily with anybody, but just listen to yourself how you sound when you're doing a pitch. Because most of these things are right now done remotely. Even if you do it in person, that is very helpful because now you can adjust. You can move around your conversation. You can take some notes and say, I want to address this first. I want to address this after. I might have a couple of points jumbled up here, so I'm going to reorder my thoughts a little bit and address it in a better way. So practice. But that's like everything else. Sales is a sport, really. It is not, you got to practice. And if you don't practice, I consider every conversation as a practice, to be honest with you.
Sure.
Every conversation, we learn something. Every conversation, it teaches our brain to behave a little differently and to act a little differently for the next conversation. So I'd say practice, don't be afraid, and learn. And if you don't know anything, just ask. Don't pretend you do know. And then you walk in and you say, well, I didn't know as much as I should. Meanwhile, they should know something.
I always look at it as this scarcity versus plenty. If you have just a little bit of something, you're going to be very protective and nervous about it. But if you have a lot of it, you're going to be relaxed about it. If you have one sales meeting this week, you're going to want the outcome of that sales meeting to be you want it to be positive because you only have that one, right?
Yeah.
But if you have 5 a day, you don't care. After the second day, you're like, you know what? I don't even care if they say yes or no. I just want to get on to the next meeting. And after you do that for a few weeks, you get so good at having that conversation that it becomes fun. It becomes your confidence goes up, your enthusiasm goes up. I remember I told you I started in the local industry in 2008. At that point, I had already had, 15 years of sales experience. And I considered myself veteran. I was leading the Asia Pacific business for CLS, but I had to learn it because it was a new business. And Doris Alberser came out, and she would come out 2 to 3 times a year, and we would do this forced March sales program throughout the region. And it would be 4 to 5 meetings a day, 3 days in Singapore, fly to Hong Kong, do the same thing, fly to Shanghai, do the same thing. And the next time would be start in Beijing and work our way back. And after her, like the first week of her first visit, I was like, this is, you know what? I have the confidence now. And then it got to be fun, right? So it's that you just got to get more meetings, man. More meetings, more meetings.
That's right. You're absolutely correct. And in saying, if you only have one meeting, you're very scared that this meeting goes sideways on you. But if you have multiple meetings, and that goes along the same idea of saying, let's say you have a sales funnel to manage, and that sales funnel has only one opportunity in it, and your entire year rides on that one opportunity, you are not going to have fun with that. And
okay, time out here. So you've led teams before, right? And I got to tell you, we're both experienced sales manager. For all you salespeople out there that are struggling, and you go to your sales manager and promise them that key account. I first went to Singapore 2008. We had a guy. And he's like, I know my numbers aren't good, but I got this monster account. It's going to come in. It's going to come in. I'm going to come in. And I was like, really? Your whole future with this company is based upon this one account. And he goes, trust me. I said, I trust you, but I'm going to verify. Set up a meeting and let's go. Let's go talk to him. You've been in scenarios like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, trust and verify for sure. The idea, especially in the industry that we work in right now, in the localization industry, I guess, there's a lot of thirst for transformational business pitches versus transactional business pitch, and that's where you get into, I have 20 opportunities versus I have 1 or 2 big opportunities, and it becomes like a sales funnel management perspective. So every individual needs to have a combination of things. You need, it's very interesting because one of the companies here I used to do business with, I walked in to their office one time to see them in the front lobby. They had like a glass box, and what it looked like, some sort of a collection of small miniature animals racing to a finish line. That's their sales funnel. Yeah. And they have like the rabbits, they've got the gazelle, they've got the zebras, they've got the giraffes, and they've got the
turtles.
And turtles, elephants, but the elephants are like the large deals, and that's what it means. And they're racing to the finish line. So the rabbits are, almost crossing the finish line, and you've got the elephant is in the back of the box trying to get in. The point here is that if you don't have that collection, that right distribution in your sales funnel, you don't have the confidence. While you're looking after trying to get that big deal coming, and wish everybody luck with that, because it's like winning the lottery for those large ones. You need to have a smaller transaction to keep feeding your ego, beside doing the revenue part, and to feed your confidence and to learn. That's where the learning becomes. If you learn with the smaller deals and learn the product, the service, the likes and dislikes, etc., while keeping an eye on some of those large ones and walking them through, they're not going to close overnight. And then when you get to the large one, you already built enough self-confidence that when you step up to that large deal, you can close it, no problem.
Awesome. And, people talk about sales. They talk about hunters and farmers. I think I don't necessarily like that analogy because I don't think it's complete. because I look at, even when you're out just as a quote unquote hunter, one of the things I look at is like basically you're planting seeds, which is not what hunters do. But the more seeds you plant, the more opportunities you'll have, stuff that will grow. Some stuff will never appear. Some stuff will appear and it'll be small, but the big ones take time. Okay. Now I guess you could call that hunting, where you go hunt some small game but it takes longer to get the big game, whatever, potato. But I totally agree with you. It's important to have a good mix. You mentioned something about it helps your ego. And I have long argued that sales, a big part of it is the inside game. What's going on in your mind? Because it can be hard. I mean, you get more no's. You get a lot, especially if you're doing like cold calling and sending cold outbound emails and things like that. You're going to get a lot more no's than you are going to get yeses. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the abuse or perceived abuse? Because I don't consider it abuse. For me, I don't even care, man.
I don't care either. I developed a thick skin over the years. So, initially in my career, like this is like going back mid 90s or something. I can't remember now. Early 90s, sorry. And when I hear the word no, and I was an engineer at the time, I was a software coder. And I used to hear the word no. When I used to hear the word no, I feel like something hit me like really hard. Right. How do you deal with that word no, right?
Right.
And then somebody had the wisdom when they discovered that I have some sales ability that surpassed what an engineer would. I mean, that's how I got discovered in the sales side of things. So I've had to learn pretty quickly. Like I'm on the clock here. January comes, and I have December to hit my numbers. I don't have a lot of time to waste here. Either I'm selling it, I'm on the phone, or nobody's going to do it for me. So I remember the first time I was making phone calls. Sometimes I get a voicemail. Sometimes I get the wrong number. Sometimes people say, I'm busy. Sometimes, sorry, I don't need it. Like you get a whole bunch of different answers, right? I'm talking about the negative one, not the positive ones. So in that particular individual, said F off, and he just hung up the phone on me. And I thought, oh shit, how do I deal with this? So anyway, so I had to deal with it. I mean, I got more calls to do. So what I had those types of calls, and I luckily in my career I only had it once, and I was calling anyway. This is a long story. We don't have enough time to cover it now, but I had to go outside, walk around the house a little bit. I was working from home that day, and get some oxygen in me because I don't know how to deal with this one. It was my first time. Now it doesn't matter. Over the years, it doesn't matter. So what I say is, look, you're offering somebody something. Not all the answers are going to be positive. I don't care how much you believe in your product. There's going to be a situation there that the product is not a fit. There's going to be a situation there that I don't have the budget. Whatever the reason is, they're going to tell you no at some point. So what you can do is just, if you're that type of person that really the word no bothered you, like as it did for me the first time. Yeah. First is take a break, step back, think it over. Why are you doing this? And then when you reflect a little bit on this one, they're not really saying no to you. And they're probably not saying no to you forever. They're just saying no to you probably now. Maybe the no can turn to a yes later. So
yeah, and don't make any assumptions about why they said no. Like, oh, maybe I made a mistake, or maybe my product's not any good, or maybe they don't like me, or maybe they're a jerk, or maybe it's like it's all wasted energy. Typically, they'll say, like when you're calling, they're going to say no, or no, not right now, or yes, and those are the three. Essentially, you can distill it. The no's are good because you know what? Fine, you're off my list now. The not right nows, that's your future gold. Because they say, I said, would it be okay if I touch back in a couple months? Absolutely. Go ahead. Okay. So that's the future seeds that are going to grow, right? And people appreciate when you do follow up. And then the yeses are the yeses. But God, it's really important to learn not to take it personally.
Not to take it personally. And, another tip for the audience, the listeners out there, look, if you
all two of them.
Yeah, all two of them, me and you. The individuals that we're trying to address in an organization. So I'm talking about business to business here. In this case, you and I, right?
Yeah.
Business to consumer is a little different. As I'm trying to sell insurance policies, will be a different conversation than what we're having right now. Business to business, generally, when a business addressing another business, there's more than one person on the other side. So
Sure.
that individual that said no to us, I would say, let's try somebody else. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong decision maker. Maybe he's not the decision maker. Maybe that conversation is absolutely not of interest to that individual. Maybe the guy who's sitting next cubicle to him, maybe, or virtual cubicle, maybe that individual have some interest in what we want to say. And I always ask myself the question, have I reached the right person? Did I reach the right person? Am I talking to the right person? And not necessarily, I'm not asking that individual that question. I'm trying to assess it in my mind. Is that individual the right individual to continue that conversation with? And the fact somebody said no to me, I automatically, in my mind, I'm not taking it personally. I'm thinking I'm talking to the wrong person.
There you go. I love that. Let me ask you this. Have you ever made a mistake in a meeting or on a call?
Yes, it does. I mean, when you have so many calls and so many meetings, you're like,
of course.
It's of course.
So how do you deal with that? What's your way of dealing with that?
So the short answer to that is I apologize that I made a mistake, and I always do, and give the correct answer if that was what we're talking about, an answer or a promise or whatever it is, and then move on from that. Look, it's like driving a car for so many years. If you're driving your car, you're going to make accidents. That's why there's insurance. If you're not driving your car, if it's sitting in the driveway, you're not having any accidents. God forbid anybody have accidents. But sales is the same way. If you're out there, you're talking to people, you're engaging in, my God, multitude of conversations on a daily basis. I'm sure something's going to come out the wrong way, or you're going to be given the wrong information. Or you're going to make mistakes. The key thing is recognize that you made a mistake, apologize for it, and try to put some measures so it doesn't happen again.
I totally agree. And one of the best sales managers, and who's actually currently still a very good friend of mine that I've ever had or worked with, I did something really stupid. I don't remember exactly what it was. But I was afraid to report back to him. But I said, hey, I got to tell you something. And I told him the story. And he said, well, what did you learn? And I said, well, I learned this. And he goes, so is that going to happen again? And I said, nope. And he goes, good. Just as long as you're learning, man. I was like, whoa. Yeah. It's like, whoa. So I have this habit now. Every time I walk out of a meeting, regardless if it went poorly or if it went well, I'm like, what can I learn from there? What could I improve on? And, and if I wasn't happy, I'm not going to beat myself up about it, because that's just a recipe for depression. Right. I just think about, okay, what can I learn? How can I improve? And guess what? And sometimes I'll even write it down so that I kind of like make the lesson a little bit more permanent. But I think it's really important to continually or always be learning.
Yes, for sure. And, one of my first job, actually, it was a bank teller, and I was at high school at the same time. I don't know what I did. I made some stupid mistake. And, I went to the manager, wanted to apologize for my mistake. And the individual was so kind. He told me, and I'll still never forget that. It was my first job. He said, that means you're working. You made the mistake. That means you're working. It happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very wise person, man. That's, because if you can't beat people up, well, you can, but then you're going to lose their loyalty and maybe their employment with you. Let me ask you, we talked earlier about doing cold calls, and these days, a lot of people don't do cold calls. In fact, the younger generation, they just want to text everybody and they'll send out emails. But when I was first getting started, I would do the calls. We didn't have email, man. I do the calls and or faxes. I do the faxes, and I had an algorithm depending on which job that I was like, okay, I know if I do 10 faxes or 10 calls, I'll get 3 positive responses. I mean, the number always changed, but I knew what the algorithm was. So I would say, how many positive responses do I want? And then I would just extrapolate out how many calls or faxes I'd have to send. These days, calling can be considered almost aggressive, especially depending on what country you're in, right? So what's the workaround, and what are your thoughts on that? Like, let's say you send a cold email. Do you call and follow up? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's every industry or every company has their own cadence that they follow in terms of how do we approach lead generation for a salesperson. And if I was a person in sales starting up right now, I want to throw the net so wide out there to see what I can get out of it. And you're right. Today's world, hardly anybody answers the phone. And if numbers unknown shows up on your screen, you're not answering that. Unless it's coming from your family, you're not answering it.
Exactly. And even if it's from my family, sometimes I'm not going to answer it. Depends who on my family. You know who you are.
So the truth is, and today's world has given us, the advancement in technology has given us a lot of tools that we can get to the audience with relative, I don't want to say ease, but it's accessible. It's there. We can do more now than we did before. And we were talking earlier about generative AI. Yesterday I was talking about generative AI. And that has offered us a whole bunch of tools and ways to get to our audience in terms of generating the next lead or generating the next interest in whatever we're selling.
So I want to get to there definitely, but I want to make a transition because what I found was from phone calls, we got to emails and you would get email lists. And then everybody went to LinkedIn. And for a while, LinkedIn was awesome. I've closed some very big deals. Well, in my world, big deals, $170,000 of executive coaching off of 2 messages on LinkedIn with somebody. I mean, I thought that was pretty good, pretty efficient. But these days, I mean, what are your thoughts before we get to the generative AI and this next gen of lead generation tools or lead discovery? What are your thoughts on LinkedIn right now? Is it dead or is it still there?
So I still use LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is still valued, but there is a cadence that you have to follow on LinkedIn. It is not necessarily, I see somebody and remember this theory we were discussing earlier. Get to know your customer before you even reach out and say, hey, I'm selling, and this is what I get sometimes on LinkedIn, and I ignore them. Some people try to sell me something. Very short message. I'm selling XYZ. Would you like to buy it? Who are you? Why are you sending me this? No. So it goes into the ignore box, right? LinkedIn's still valid. You need to set yourself, and this is, it takes time sometimes because it's not as easy when you first start. Let's say I'm moving from one company to another. If it's in the same industry, it's easier. If you're jumping industries, it's even harder because now you have to, there's this whole thing about being a thought leader. And that's what this conversation is about. Being a thought leader in the industry that you're working in. And you need to be that authority that people run to ask questions, to ask for support, for help, etc. And LinkedIn is the right place for that. This is where you can post articles. This is where you can be an educated member of LinkedIn and educate others. So prove that you can educate others, train them on something, or give them a piece of information that is relevant, that is current. And this is where now you're trying to elevate your searchability. You're trying to elevate how far are you going up on the search? How many times are you showing up in profile views, etc. So your profile views needs to get up in the ranking in order for you to be visible. And if you're not doing this, if you're not doing like posting dailies, if you're not commenting, sharing, liking other posts, that means the algorithm in LinkedIn is going to push you down. That means it's almost inactive. So as you engage with LinkedIn, as you send, email your connections, send them some information, share posts of the industry, like other people's posts in interesting facts, etc. This is very, very important. You have to be active on every level in LinkedIn in order for you to do that. Now, I average close to about 350 activities on LinkedIn per day. So
per day.
So what average. Some days are less, some days are higher. It depends.
Now, let me just push back a little bit. Because I've hired junior salespeople before, and they wanted to spend all their time on social media and LinkedIn, and I'm like, hey man, you can't you can't do that. You got to get out in front of customers, right? Now you're not a junior salesperson. You're at that level of developing your thought leadership role, and you're also an industry connector and things like that. So can you speak to that though? If you have a junior salesperson, how do you know if they're spending too much time doing that?
Yeah, that's right. So in all of this, and this is where it gets really interesting. Some people ask me, like, valid question. I'm not just developing the thought leadership part of my job. No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually meeting customers. I have, today I was supposed to meet a customer, but they canceled on me. So I still go out, meet customers. I meet brand new customers. I generate leads. I do all this. And while I'm doing this, this is what that activity is generating. This is what the whole LinkedIn activity is generating. You cannot be on LinkedIn, you got to be focused. You got to be sending it for a reason. Why are you engaging with people? And what I notice a lot about people now in the world is they really value soft sale. Mm-hmm. Like, this whole aggressive sales style, you got to keep it in check. I'm an aggressive sales guy, but I keep it in check because I read the audience. I know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
They prefer a soft sell approach. I'm backing off. I'm reducing my aggressiveness in my sales style. And the same thing on social media. What social media did is it took our behavior in the physical world and mapped it into an electronic world. That's it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were to say, well, let's eliminate LinkedIn out of the equation completely. So what's left? I have to attend board of directors meetings. I got to go to chambers of commerce meetings. I got to show up in World Trade Center meetings here. We have them in the city. I got to go to every meeting physically and shake hands, distribute business cards, etc. You're doing the same thing, but electronically. But at the same time, I'm not focusing 100% of my time on this. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Another application. Let me back up. That thought leadership role, it goes also to that building trust and credibility, because as I mentioned earlier, trust is important, but it takes time. But one way you can accelerate the trust building process is to be a thought leader, for example, to have some certain credentials, to be introduced by somebody else. So being visible on LinkedIn in the appropriate manner definitely helps. Another application that I use is every time before I meet somebody, I go and look at their LinkedIn profile and try to find a couple points of commonality. Oh, they lived in Japan before. Oh, they went to this university. Oh, they're a scuba diver. Whatever it is, right? I mean, find something, and then you can kind of bring that into the conversations.
That's sometimes. Right. That's right. Get to know the person. I mean, we started the conversation with that. Get to know the person. You've got it right here. I mean, sometimes I flip to their Facebook page just to know what they do, who are they. Absolutely.
So before I kind of cut you and turned you off onto this direction here with the calling and then LinkedIn, you were starting to get pretty excited about these next gen kind of prospecting tools using AI. Can you talk a little bit about the tools, how you use them?
Yeah. So one of the things is a limiting factor in every sales job is the amount of items that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. And, how many emails you are going to send, how many posts in LinkedIn you got to be responding to. Those are the amount of content that you have to produce to become a thought leader or for that individual to be visible out there. And every day it's getting harder. Why is that? Because there are, a billion users out there, and those users are dumping data and content in the same platform. And what you're trying to do is to try to compete for visibility among this ocean of content. So if you produce content once a week, you're not that visible. And if you produce, it becomes for a salesperson, and that's what I've learned over the years, it becomes a content game, content production game. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. So the more I produce content, the more likelihood, and there's no guarantees, the more likelihood that I'm going to get a little bit more visible than the next guy. And where generative AI is helping is in that content generation, in that how many of those answering in fine tuning the message. This is another thing too. I write, English is my third language when I first started in this country. So I write in a quirky way or something. So now the generative AI, what it allows me to do is allows me to systematically write concise, to the point messages that sounds like it's coming from me, because it takes my message and just rephrase it. And now I can replicate that process, and I can do this many times. And it doesn't, if it's email or if I'm responding to a LinkedIn post, for instance, just a tip for you or for somebody who's listening is that you can actually go to a LinkedIn post, any LinkedIn post, and copy the link from the LinkedIn post and go to your favorite generative AI tool and type the following: respond to this LinkedIn post. And then you paste the link in that generative AI box, and it will actually read the post, reply to the post in a very thoughtful way. Now you have to, and this is where I always keep talking about, you can't use these things blindly, right? So you gotta stay in the middle of that. So you gotta.
So your comments on my post were done by ChatGPT.
Yours different. Sometimes I do.
Mine's different.
Sometimes
Thanks. That's awesome, man. Respond to this post. I'm learning from you, man. This is good stuff. So, my two oldest sons were both into sales, and it's my fault. I kind of led them down that road and got them started. And one of them's at AWS right now and doing really well. Another one's he's still in university, but he's working almost full time for an LSP. They sell full suite of services. And one of the things that's changed is the use of tools like HubSpot, for example, and running these sequences and kind of automating. So sending out emails, but before you send out the emails, you got to build your list of
list building,
list building, and then sending out the emails, and then sending a follow up email, and then doing a call, that kind of thing. And so my advice for anybody getting into sales is to understand the tools as well, because the tools can really help you to be more efficient. What are your thoughts?
I do believe that the tools, like most tools now, have those cadences built in. You can build the workflow. Salesforce has it. Everybody has them. And I use different tools over the years, but you need to figure out what cadence work. And I'm just giving you an example out there in terms of cadences. Okay, so you probably want to do a first reach out to be an email. The second step you want to do probably, send a follow-up email to see if that individual, you got to keep an eye on open rate and all that stuff. And that email is open or not open. There's a different task that needs to happen. If it's not open, I'll send an email. If it's a follow-up email, if it's open, then the next step will be a phone call because they opened the email. So what do you think? Kind of statement. And then you would have other, depends on that answer, if it's interest or not interest. Then in the design of the workflow, then you can have other things, other items in there. You can have, if the answer on the phone call turned out to be negative, basically, not interested right now or something to that effect, then you would keep them in what, a drip sort of an email, a sequence where every couple of months you send an email, check with them, say hello. And maybe their mind will change down the road. But if the answer is yes, then you move them to an active opportunity. So all this can be, automated, and you probably have to write it once and personalize, etc. Most of the tools do that now anyway. And that maximize. And if you marry this with, other tools out there, some database that you buy the list from, you buy the list of your intended targets from a database, you upload the list to the tool, and then all of a sudden you have your base to work from. But the main thing is being consistent. Mm-hmm. Don't miss a step. Always be consistent in what you're trying to do and you're trying to achieve as a salesperson. Because nobody wants to buy from somebody, who just throw an email and just don't show up after that. You have to demonstrate to the audience, or whoever the audience is, the customer, your prospect, that you're really hungry for the sales. If you're not hungry for the sale, nobody will give you the sale. You have to be hungry for the sale.
Totally agree. But you bring up an interesting point, because I think that traditional outbound sales is becoming more and more challenging. As you said, nobody answers their phone anymore unless it's a friend or family member. And people don't like being spammed with emails. People on LinkedIn are even pulling back a bit. And so, but you have these tools that do automated campaigns, and then you have SEO and SEM. And I almost feel like the role of outbound sales has some way shifted to marketing, to the marketing team's responsibility of generating leads.
100%.
And then if they're generating leads, then the salesperson's role actually, in my opinion, gets elevated, because they're responding to qualified leads, right?
That's right.
So, and what are you seeing, and what are your thoughts?
That's right. So the salesperson becomes a lot more efficient if you hand them a lead versus them asking them to go generate a lead. And since I was a young person starting my career, I always debated the fact, and I know some marketing people are going to hate me for saying this, I think you should pull away. I think the marketing now becomes a lead gen department. It used to be marketing. Let's take care of the brand. Let's make sure we have the right logo. Let's make sure
we got this nice brochure that nobody even do people use brochures anymore.
So slowly, and I think we're there now, where we're saying marketing is part of sales. It is the sales department now.
Yeah.
So and which I've been from back in the days, 30 years ago when marketing was marketing, I was thinking like, just take their budget away and give it to the salespeople. They get to the salesperson, they get to the prospect quickly. But now with the tool we have, now with the technology we have, we know exactly when somebody was on somebody else's website. We know exactly what they're doing on that website. There's a lot of tools that monitor these things, and they can identify who are these leads, where are they located, buyer's intent. That's what they call it now. Do they have a buying intent? And why are they, browsing our website? Why are they opening our emails? Let's engage with them. Let's go out and feed them some information electronically. You're right. If you hand over leads to the salespeople, they become a lot more efficient. The sales cost will go down because now you've got more time to invest in actually, handling leads. I don't want to close them because, depends on the lead. The lead will be coming in. Sometimes it's, you got to work it. You got to take time. They're not ready to close. But the individual, the lead generation today with the tools that we currently have, Mark, are absolutely stunning. Defining out of the ether how many people that they're interested in your product and services, just because somebody dropped by your website and you're able to report on that, it is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and I 100% aligned with you in terms of turning over the marketing budget to sales. I'm going to get in trouble too. No, I think that the marketing team serves an incredibly valuable function, and when they're on, it makes everything work because you get these inbound leads, and most of them are qualified, and it allows the salespeople to do higher value added work. We're kind of coming up on our time here. Let me ask you. Tell me a favorite sales story.
Oh my God. On the spot. I got a few of those. Which one I want to tell you? Okay. So you probably heard me tell you this before, but I won't name any names. I won't name the company. I've been trying to, when I was starting my career in the telecom business, and I was in the sales capacity selling hardware. So I wanted to see this director. He's director of a major company in Canada. Let's put it this way. Now we're narrowing it down. And I tried. And back in the days you mentioned earlier, emails was very scarce. No emails, phones, and that's it. And you got to see people face to face, or ask somebody to recommend.
And if he's senior, he's not going to answer his own phone anyway. He's going to have an administrative assistant or something like that, the gatekeeper.
That's right. So I tried, and I wasn't able to. So one time I was going in to see another customer in the same building. I noticed that he came out of a car, and I was like distance from him. I wasn't close. So I wasn't able to walk up to him. And I noticed his card. So I went up, done my business, whatever. I did what I need to do. And one day I got like this crazy idea in my head. I said, I got to go talk to this guy. How do I talk to him? So I drove over to the location. In the parking lot, I nicked his car with my bumper and my car. And then I went upstairs to the secretary. I said, listen, I apologize, but I don't know for sure. I think I may have scratched Mr. So-and-so's car. And here's my insurance card, and I apologize. And so is he here? I'd like to apologize to him. So he came out, and when he came out of the office about his car, he's now concerned. I shook his hand and I said, I'm sorry. Asked me, are you okay? I said, yeah, no, it's just a small scratch. I just want to make sure that you're good with, I'll fix whatever needs to be done. We'll fix it. He said, okay, well, let's walk downstairs and see what happened. So we're walking in the elevator. By the time we got in the elevator, he asked me like, who are you, etc. But I did the typical elevator pitch from the 5th floor to the 1st floor. By the time we got to the car to check his car, which he told me then there's nothing, it's very minor. Don't worry about it. That's fine. I did an elevator pitch, literal elevator pitch. Presented the product, presented the service, and I shook the guy's hand, and that's it. Ended up buying from us, by the way.
That's amazing, man. That's some old schools, fully committed to getting the meeting sales. It's like on Glenn Ross kind of stuff, man. But that's awesome, man. And I respect the innovation and the commitment. That's awesome. I am going to hold my story till the next time we talk, but you know what? Maybe we could do an episode where we just tell stories. We can just tell stories. We'll do it in the evening, so it could be, I could have a beverage of my choice, and then the stories could get longer and more interesting. So
let's have a title for this one: Sales Stories from the Field.
There we go.
Or the trenches.
I like it. I like it, man. Hey, Robin, I've enjoyed working with you in the past and appreciate your friendship. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being on memoQ Talks.
No problem. Anytime.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.